Welcome this afternoon to our September Whakawhiti Kōrero PBS. My name is Janelle Atlas, and I'm a Christchurch-based mindfulness facilitator with Pause, Breathe, Smile. And I have the privilege today of being with you all in addition to the usual work that I get to do, which is helping to train teachers around the country in this mindfulness program that supports learner and teacher well-being. Now, this call today provides a chance for those of you who have already been trained in Pause, Breathe, Smile, as well as those who maybe just want to know a bit more about the program, where you've heard about it, you're interested, and you want to hear a little bit more about how it actually works. So thank you so much for being here today. I also want to just mention that we have a comment box here on Zoom. Obviously, everyone is very familiar with Zoom these days, but if you have a comment or a question for our guest at any point, please feel free to just enter it into the chat box and we will get to it as we are able to. Now, before I introduce today's guest, I would like to give a big thank you to Southern Cross, our funder, for making Pause, Breathe, Smile available completely free of charge to all primary and intermediate schools throughout Aotearoa. Their generous financial support helps us to support teacher and learner well-being through nurturing mind health skills. So again, if you're on this call and if you want to sign your school up or hear more about this program, please feel free to visit our website, pausebreathesmile.nz, and you can submit a simple request there for us to contact you. We would love to hear from you and help you to support well-being at your school with this evidence-based approach to haora. Now, I would like to invite all of you on this afternoon to join in a brief mindfulness practice. And this practice is one of the new ones that we have available on our website in the members area for teachers to use with their classes, with their tamariki. This practice takes a really simple metaphor of the breath as an anchor. Now, this simple, familiar image of an anchor dropping down to the seafloor to keep a boat safe and steady in a storm is a really powerful one. It's very, very powerful. And kids in a lot of schools where Pause, Breathe, Smile is used, you'll hear teachers and children alike use the phrase drop anchor. Children on the playground, someone rushing down the hallway, someone getting a little agitated or frustrated about something. Often we can encourage each other by saying, hey, our breath is an anchor. Can you drop anchor with your breath? So right now we're going to do that together. I invite you to find a posture that feels both relaxed and attentive. If you're comfortable doing so, you can allow your eyes to drift closed, and let's turn your noticing to your breathing. Can you feel your body breathing right here, right now? When you feel overwhelmed or scared or unsettled, you can imagine yourself as a boat. You're in a boat on the ocean, and your breath is the anchor, a stabilizing force. So when life storms are raging around you, you can drop anchor by taking mindful breaths. So right now, breathing in and breathing out, noticing how your breath comes in through your nose and descends down into your lungs and down into your belly, near your diaphragm. Feel your breathing. And as you continue noticing your breathing, can you picture an anchor as you take a breath down into your belly? Can you picture that anchor dropping down through the water, down through the turbulent seas, finally reaching the sea floor? Continue noticing your breathing, dropping deeper and deeper down into your belly. And with each breath you take, you can picture the anchor deep down, far down in the water, below the crashing waves and the howling winds. And it's at rest, holding you steady. Dropping anchor doesn't stop the storm, just like taking deep breaths doesn't change the outside. But mindful breathing like this can support your inner peace and your ability to regulate your responses to things beyond your control. Good. And let's take 3 more good, deep anchoring breaths together. And when you're ready, please open your eyes. Perhaps you might shift in your chair, adjust your posture, and return your attention to the screen. Thank you for joining me in that very brief mindfulness practice this afternoon. As I said, that is available as a guided audio track on our website for younger learners and older learners. And it's something that kids really seem to resonate with. So I wanted to share it with you all today. And now I'm delighted to introduce our guest for today's Whakawhiti Kōrero. And who we have with us today, we're very lucky. We have the wonderful Deb Barclay. She has worked in education for about 25 years, the last 6 as a principal. Her kura, Manuka Primary, is on the North Shore of Auckland, and they are a proud PBS school. Deb, thank you so much for being here with us today to talk about mindfulness at Manuka.
Kia ora, Janelle, and thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to it.
We're so glad to have you here. So to kick things off, I wanted to ask, when were you initially trained in Pause, Breathe, Smile, and what kind of familiarity did you have with practicing or leading mindfulness before getting trained in Pause, Breathe, Smile?
Sure. So this is our 4th year. So we were trained in 2019 by Grant. He came in a January teacher-only day. And look, it was quite new then. It's hard to believe, like we've come so far in terms of mindfulness with respect to mental health through the COVID journey. 4 years ago, it wasn't that common in schools in our area. I brought it in because I've always had such an interest in mindfulness and meditation as well. I've always had that deep yearning to, I guess, access a peaceful place within myself and really want to find presence and magic in the mundane, I guess, and just be present in the moment, because often I'm not and haven't been. So it came from my own personal desire initially. And then I remember getting some flyers through, I think it must have been through my email and through the Gazette. And I thought, I saw PBS advertised and I thought, you know what, we're ready for this. So yeah, 2019 was when we started our journey. So this is our 4th year now.
Wonderful. And I understand that as a leader at your school, you may have run into a little bit of hesitancy, pushback, or resistance to bringing mindfulness into your kura originally. Can you tell us a little bit more about that without naming names? But what was that like, kind of introducing it with some hesitancy with some of your staff?
Sure. Look, I think in any organisation, when you introduce a new initiative or a new program, I don't think it's exclusive to schools. There's always a couple of people that are resistant. And I think often it comes down to people's lack of facts or information. There's a level of uncertainty or fear about, oh, what am I going to have to do? I mean, I've been there myself with new initiatives in schools over the years, so I fully understand that. I remember when we had the teacher only day, a couple of staff came into it and said, I remember one in particular, as she was walking down the hallway into the staff room, she said, I'm just not into all this woo-woo business. I'm feeling very nervous about the day. And I said to her, and I always say this to staff, with anything new, when people are uncomfortable, is just have an open mind. Just come in. That's all I ask of you, is that you have an open mind. And it's just crazy. It's often the case. She is probably our biggest advocate for Pause, Breathe, Smile, that particular teacher. I don't know why it works out that way, that the person that is often, she wasn't even overly resistant. She just wasn't really into it at the time. Often those people become your biggest advocates. And she just raves about PBS. Over time, so that was initially for the TOD. And then as we do the program annually, quite the prescriptive, the manual, the handbook, I've got a couple of staff over the years who have been like, not 100% into it. And I do shift gear from please have an open mind to actually this is about the students and we're doing it at our school. So there's a bit that happens in between, but after a year or two, if someone's still resistant, it's actually this is about the children and offering them a toolkit for their wellbeing kitty. And that's our priority. We're in the game of children, teaching children. That's what we're trained to do. And, wellbeing is such a big part of that. So that's kind of how I've dealt with that. To be honest, everyone enjoys it mostly.
So I do remember that you said that first year, there were some challenges in kind of getting it up and running. Can you speak a little bit to that and what you've learned about then making it embedded at Manuka?
Absolutely. So, like with any initiative in a school, I think the less boundaries you give it, the more variety you're going to get. So initially when Grant did the PLD with us in January, from memory, I think we said, look, roll the 8-week lesson out, maybe term 1, go into term 2 if you have to. And I mean, if you're an educator and you're working in school, you know how busy teaching life is. It's just so full. That program is so full. And our priorities often are literacy, numeracy, followed by inquiry, etc. And what I found in that first year, that if anything had to give, it was always PBS, because it was just seen as fitting slightly outside of the NZC, the New Zealand curriculum. And so, it was a trial year. We gave everyone the opportunity to roll out the 8 lessons, and they did, but it took a long time. I think some of them were finishing it by the end of term 2. And so what we did, and I hope I'm not jumping the gun with answering this, Janelle, what we did after that is every year since then, we've been really prescriptive about it. So Pause, Breathe, Smile gets taught in our school from the handbook, from weeks 2 through to week 9. Every term 1, the same day, it's a Thursday, so no one is scheduled to go off to PE or ESOL or anything in our middle block. It's done from 11:30 to 12:30. And as senior leaders, we walk around the whole school every Thursday, weeks 2 to 9 in term 1, and we know that Pause, Breathe, Smile is being taught. So that's how we've kind of got around that. And then, of course, we integrate aspects of Pause, Breathe, Smile throughout the year. But it's really important to us that that handbook is taught, because what typically happens in a school with any program, initiative, curriculum, document, etc., it just gets watered down. I think teachers become very busy, and before you know it, you're not even picking up the handbook and you're thinking, right, I'll whip out lesson 3, but it really loses its juiciness and the science behind it. I think the handbook's so well written and designed to teach progressively. And if you wander away from that in that first part of the year, you really risk the program being watered down to just being a little bit of mindful movement once every now and again. So that would be my advice. Teach to that handbook right at the start of the year and hit the ground running with that, because that PBS is such a big part of our culture now that we want it to be embedded early in the year.
Right. So I would definitely want to hear more about how you do that. But I mean, I guess maybe a question for someone who's on this call who's like, okay, I'm hearing you, talk about like this real conviction. Why are you so proud that Manuka Primary School is a Pause, Breathe, Smile school? Like, why do you keep doing it year after year?
Many reasons. We prioritize mental health and well-being here. It's super important. It's never been more important than in the last couple of years as we've all navigated COVID and the huge disruption that's been on so many levels. We have seen the benefits of Pause, Breathe, Smile here in classrooms with individual children. I just had a little boy in my office this morning who became very angry in one of the classrooms, a little 6-year-old boy. He's got a significant speech problem and he becomes very frustrated, and his outlet is anger. And he and I were doing some mindful movements in my office this morning, and we were talking about his different options that he's got when he gets angry, and he actually said some of my mindful breathing. I mean, it's just amazing how the kids have that as a tool in their little kitty. So I've seen it. I see it in the sick bay, I see it in my office, I see it in the classroom, I see the effects it has on the children. They're calm. They've got strategies to use when they become upset. I hear from parents that they use it at home, so the children have gone home and taught it to the parents. And it's such a positive, it creates such a positive culture in the school. There's a shared language around kindness, around being mindful. So to me, it has huge benefits. I guess, but fitting within the culture of our school. I'm proud of it. It's on our website that we're a proud Pause, Breathe, Smile school. And I think parents really value that now. Parents and caregivers value that a school actually really cares about children's mental health and their well-being, as well as the education from the curriculum.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, you can't really separate those things, can you? Like if that little learner who came in this morning, was he able to work on his, writing his alphabet well when he was that angry? I mean, it's kind of like, what do you need to address first?
For sure. You're absolutely right. So, and many of the classrooms start their day with mindful movements. And, for children like that, it's really important that they have those little tools that they can draw on when they're upset or when they're feeling anxious or they're angry. I mean, kids are just dealing with so much in a school with their peers.
Mm.
So, they're always faced with situations where they can just take a step back and take a mindful breath and, refocus.
So when that example you already gave us today, when a child comes to you out of sorts or maybe even in trouble, maybe they've been sent down, because they've done something they shouldn't have done, does mindfulness-based practice, from Pause, Breathe, Smile, inform how you interact with them? And if so, what are the kind of, in addition to mindful movement, what are the things that you draw in from the lessons to help support that learner?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely draw, and that's the first place I go to. So when a child comes to me, and I'll just use a little boy I had in my room today, he was crying and upset. He was kicking furniture as he was coming in, and I know not to interact with a child when they're in red brain like that. I mean, most teachers would know that anyway. And it was just about getting him into a really calm spot. Initially, I just left him to calm down, and then I sat opposite him, and we did some mindful breathing together. We did some mindful movements. So the junior school loved the licorice straps and the seaweed, and he was really open to that this morning. So, and then I find the children respond really well to mirror breathing. I know that's not in the handbook, but when they're little, they often respond quite well to just following your breath and you being really mindful. And I go into a very mindful place myself when I'm dealing with children because I need to be, super present in the moment and be listening and coming from a place of kindness. So I guess that's how it looks when someone comes in. And it's the same in the sick bay when children are sick. There was a girl in the sick bay this afternoon who couldn't stop coughing. And I just sat down with her and we did some deep breathing together and talked about, what had gone really well in her day. So in some ways we were kind of bringing in aspects of gratitude there just to try and get her mind off what she was upset about.
What I find, speaking of coughing, what I find really intriguing about what you just said is so much of our work as teachers and school leaders is being the model. It's not saying to a child, now remember, in Pause, Breathe, Smile lessons, here's that thing we can draw on, right? It's you start to do it. You monitor your breathing, you regulate yourself. And then because we do co-regulate as human beings, right? It's not up to individuals.
Sure.
It's we do it in these spaces together. And so I think that's really beautiful how you just put that.
Thank you.
So the research that we have done consistently has shown into how Pause, Breathe, Smile works in New Zealand schools does find that it works best as a whole school approach. That whole, as you've been mentioning, that it infuses the entire school community. And teachers, do find it hard to implement lasting changes if they're the only one doing it. Whereas if everyone in the school is sharing the same framework and language and practices, it tends to lead to better benefits and outcomes. And I'm wondering, how do you see that whole school approach playing out at Manuka? You've talked about how you've made it happen, but how do you sense it and see it throughout the classrooms and throughout the school spaces?
Yeah, look, I couldn't imagine one teacher trying to do that on their own for a start. It's just, I don't know how they would do it. I think you've got to have the leader and the leadership team on board, myself. To me, it has to be a whole school approach because then you have a shared language around Pause, Breathe, Smile, and it creates that language that gets shared around PBS is such a big, as I said, big part of the school culture. And we do you want me to go into some ways we integrate a whole school, Janelle?
Absolutely, that would be great.
Yep. So after we do the 8-week lesson in term 1, the way that we keep it sort of motivated throughout the whole school throughout the year, which is always a challenge. And I've just made a little list here. If you see me looking down, I didn't want to forget anything. Every week our team, so our junior team and our senior team have hui. And so the beginning of each hui, we always do mindful breathing and mindful movements. And what that looks like is a different teacher. So it doesn't sit on one person's shoulders. a different teacher leads that. So for example, we have our junior learning community out on our turf. We have it outside. We have the junior learning community hui on a Monday morning, where we sing the national anthem, we sing waiata, excuse me, we give out certificates. That always starts with mindful movement. But the teachers take turns at getting the children doing some mindful breathing, and then the mindful movements we use are straight off the PBS website. So they're the licorice straps, the elephant, the giraffe, and sometimes the kids create their own ones as well. That happens in the senior learning community as well. They have their hui. We haven't had whole school assemblies for about 2 years. When we did, we always started that with mindful movement and breathing as well. So I think it's something that has to be regular and frequent, otherwise it's quickly forgotten. And I think when you pass that responsibility on to teachers to lead, it brings it to the forefront of their mind as well. Oh, that's right, I'm leading that on Monday. Let me do a quick search on the site. PBS goes on in the classrooms, most classrooms. I can't say every single room. I would say 80% of our classrooms after term 1, usually at the beginning of the day and often after morning tea or lunch, because it's such a great strategy to calm a class down. They come in running around at morning tea, they're doing their quiet reading at their tables, they come down, let's do some mindful movement, some mindful breathing, and then we start our day. So that's, those pockets of time in a school day are really good. I know one of our year 3 teachers does it also just before she goes home. So they do some mindful movement, and then they do a think, pair, share, and turn to a partner about what they've been grateful for through the day. I always have a quote on our staff room fridge. It's just a great place to have quotes. Everyone goes to the staff room fridge, the teachers, and I always usually have a mindful, like a PBS quote, something around mindfulness, something about breathing. Again, the method in my madness there is bringing it to the forefront of people's minds that we are a pause, breathe, smile. It's not something you just tick off in term 1. I dojo our app, our school communication app is Class Dojo. I regularly dojo the parents. So when in term 1, when we're teaching pause, breathe, smile, I'm always nipping around. I'm either videoing classes or taking little snapshots. One of the lessons involves the children in the summer. It's beautiful. They go out and lie under our beautiful big maple trees. And I always take photos of that and capture those moments. And I use it as a little opportunity to message the parents what lesson we're up to, because everyone's up to the same lesson, of course, in the same week. This week's lesson 4, we're doing, all things rising and falling. So I'm trying to educate the parents along the way, and then they can talk to their children about it when they come home. I do a lot of praising of staff that use it too. So in our staff room, we have an appreciation box, and people write special little notes throughout the week, and we celebrate those on a Friday. If I see people using pause, breathe, smile, I always pop it on a note. That's just my little way of getting it in there. Yay, Sharia, it was fantastic to see you doing PBS last Thursday. And, of course, people go, oh, that's right. Yes, I'll be doing that too. I must remember to plan for it. So that's kind of how we integrate it. It's big. I think one of the biggest spaces pause, breathe, smile is really relevant is in our sick bay. And yes, we do call it sick bay. I know that's an old term, the medical room. Because children often come in there really upset, and they are out of breath, they're anxious, they're crying, or they've got like the girl this afternoon, she couldn't stop coughing. So there's a lot of sickness around at the moment. So we have a lot of pause, breathe, smile strategies that we use in the sick bay, and all the teachers know what to do. Even our teacher aides are trained in pause, breathe, smile. I should have mentioned that at the top of the conversation. It's really important that everyone in your school is trained. So if you're having a PLD day, get your TAs, your teacher assistants on it as well, because they're always working with the children as well. It's no good them not having those skills. So that's kind of how we integrate that. I hope I've answered that enough, Janelle. It's ongoing. It's ongoing.
I think you've given lots of really great ways to show that it's about developing an ethos through the entire school. It's not a lesson that happens once a week 8 times and then we go,
Sure.
okay, well we've done pause, breathe, smile, now we're mindful. That mindfulness really is something that we can all continue cultivating. It's not just for children. It's actually a good reminder to all of us. And I love that idea of quotes or ideas. And then I also think your point about really bringing the whānau in, to really educate them and let them know your kids are going to be coming home talking about these things. Here's what it is. I think that's a question that many schools ask when they first start is, how do we let parents know about this? And I think you've illustrated some really great ways to do that. So thanks.
Yeah, and right from get-go, our phrasing has always been, we are a proud pause, breathe, smile school. It's not we do pause, breathe, smile. We're proud to be that. We love that about our school. And I personally am super proud that we're a pause, breathe, smile. I think it's such an asset for a school to have, and parents love it. I haven't had one parent say, oh, I don't want my child learning that. Parents want that for their children. They want their children to be calm and happy and to be able to have the ability to calm themselves down.
So this is a little bit more of a personal question, Deb, but do you consider yourself to be a naturally mindful person?
I'd love to say yes. In theory, yes. Yeah, I guess. Yeah. I mean, I practice mindfulness myself. I mean, I do it here every day. And I think I should have mentioned that as well, actually. The children, as I said, being a model of that's super important. I think it's important for the children to see that I'm doing that and I'm learning. And I openly talk to the children that, sometimes the kids know I get really nervous when I speak in an assembly. And I've always been really transparent about that. And all the kids at Manuka know that my goal is to get up at the end of year prize giving to speak without notes. Like, that's always been my big goal since I was a beginning principal. And I'm in my 7th year, by the way. It's been a long goal. I still take notes with me. And I talk to the kids. I'm a bit anxious. I'm a bit nervous. I'm going to have to do some deep breathing here to get me through it. So yeah, I would like to say I'm mindful. And for me, it's magic in the mundane. I think life is about this moment right now, like right here for us, and being present in that moment in the most mundane things, whether you're making a cup of tea, whether I'm driving to work, whether I'm writing reports here at school. It's about being in that moment. So there's a real awareness for me personally to be mindful. And yeah, I do draw on the strategies a lot as a person just to get me through situations at work and home.
Yeah. So do you happen to have a favorite pause, breathe, smile lesson or topic? Like, what are the ones when that week is coming up,
Yeah.
you're really gunning for it? You're really ready.
Yeah, I love lesson 4, which is all things rising and falling. I think just because that's just so much how it is for me. I deal with so many issues here at school, and sometimes my emotions really rise, and it's that knowing that they're going to fall away. And I think the children really respond well to doing that with big brush strokes. Some of the junior teachers take the children out with a big jar of water and the big brushes in the summer, and they do that on the concrete. And I know in the book it suggests they can just do it on a piece of paper and pencil, but I think that rising and falling is just beautiful. The other thing I like is the mind jar with the glitter. That I think kids love that. And as adults, it's really an exciting time when you bring that out during the pause, breathe, smile lessons, because it's such a visual for the children.
Yeah, and anything that makes visual the thing that internally is happening and normalizing it, right? So much.
Yep.
Often when I teach, for me, lesson four is one of my favorites as well. And so when I'm giving workshops and training teachers, you can hear a pin drop at the end of that lesson. You could just it's the pivot point where everything kind of comes together. And I always say, I just turned 40. I sure wish someone had taught me this when I was 8. I wish that I had understood, emotions rise and fall. And if I let it pass through me, it'll go, and it demystifies this, sometimes scary, things that we feel. So yeah, it's a really powerful one.
And also normal, right? Like even as adults, we have that, we feel that. I think it's good to have those conversations with children It's not just them, it's us too. I have emotions that rise and fall all the time.
Yeah. Well, Deb, we have a question from one of our participants. She has asked, we have a large number of Brethren and New Order Christian parents who are struggling with the concept of mindfulness, plus considering or thinking about withdrawing their children. Do you have any ideas for how to communicate to parents who maybe are concerned that this is a religious program, or this is trying to co-opt their children's spirituality? What kinds of advice might you give for how to have a conversation with those families?
Yeah, I had one family that pulled out of Pause, Breathe, Smile in 2019, and that was because they were a deeply religious family and they felt that mindfulness had its roots in Buddhism. And, they took issue with that. And I spent hours putting together a letter, which I'm more than happy to give anyone a copy of because I've still got it. I really did my research because I really respected the parents' concerns. And I didn't want to go back being really resistant about it because at the end of the day, I thought I just didn't want to sweat the small stuff. That's my big motto at the moment. Don't sweat the small stuff. And I thought, if we have to pull their children out of the lessons, which by the way we did, and it was awful. They sat outside. You can imagine how difficult it is to send children outside during breathing exercises, Are you serious? But basically, I've got a great letter. I'm happy to share it. But what I remember most about that, it was 4 years ago when I wrote that, and I haven't ever had that problem since, or that question, not problem, that question since, is that, it was really just mindfulness is about, I explained to her that it was about the breath, mindful breathing, which we all do, regardless of religion, we're all breathing. And I didn't say that in a smarmy, sarcastic way, the way that just come out. I didn't mean for it to sound like that. I was quite clear about that. And that we would be engaging in mindful eating and that there were so many positives about that. And it was just encouraging the children to be present in the moment. There was no religious connotations. There was nothing mentioned about Buddhism. I just was so clear about it, really. I guess I brought it back down to the bones, Janelle, about what it is. Mindful movement, mindful breathing, gratitude, and real kindness, teaching children to be kind to themselves and kind to others, and teaching them how to regulate their emotions. So, I laid that all out with the sentences saying there was nothing religious in it. I was even prepared to give her a copy of the handbook so that she could look at the scripts that the teachers would be using. And and in the end, she made a decision to keep the children out of the lessons, which was so problematic for the teachers of those children. And the kids didn't want to leave the class either. They missed out, and they knew they were.
I do.
In my mind, it's just crazy to think that a parent would want a child taken out of a room for that. But for her, it was about the origin of it.
Right.
And look, no matter what I was going to say or write, I just wasn't going to change her mind. And we just left it at that. But I'm happy to share that letter.
Yeah, I think the way that you handle that is really good. I also would encourage anyone who's on this call, or if you want to hear more from someone who dealt with a lot of profound pushback at the beginning, we might be able to drop the link into the YouTube for a school down in Southland, where they actually lost multiple families left because of concern about the religious overtones, what was perceived as the religious overtones of Pause, Breathe, Smile. I think the way that I handle this when I'm in trainings with teachers who give pushback, where they say, oh, my religious beliefs don't line up with this, is I say, we're actually in a lot of Christian schools, we're in Catholic schools, we're in a Muslim school. This is a secular, mindfulness is a part of all religious traditions and people who practice no religious tradition. Being mindful, being aware of what is going on inside of ourselves is not, it doesn't have to be scary. It's being with what is. And I often will say to teachers, well, what do you think prayer is? What is, if you pray and you read your sacred text and you meditate on those words, what are you doing? And they're like, oh, and I'm like, that is a form of mindfulness. That is applying your philosophical and spiritual and religious, beliefs and traditions, and you're contemplating it. And you're trying to live, a good life. And the practices we teach do not run counter to any of those things. It's that might be your particular way of practicing it, and that's perfectly fine. If a child wants to consider this to be their prayer time instead, there's no reason that that needs to run against the science and the psychology of why we know mindfulness supports mind health. So that's one thing that I think. Another thing that we do talk about in these trainings is, in the New Zealand curriculum, in looking at haora, what is one domain of our well-being? It is our spiritual being. So regardless of what spiritual tradition your family hews to, this is a part of acknowledging that we are more than just our bodies. We are spiritual beings as well, and that this can fit in around that. So I just want to put in that word that I think it's a really tough question, and I can hear, Deb, in your talking how you really grappled with, how do I respond kindly and respectfully, but also really say, hey, we know this is good for kids, and it's a difficult conversation to have.
Absolutely it is, yeah. But I'm happy to share the letter I put together. There was nothing, it was all factual. Yeah. And I agree with you, Janelle. Of course, spiritual well-being is super important.
Yeah. And Emma says, thank you very much. And that, what you're saying does make sense. And I'll follow up with her directly if to connect you to if she wants to hear more. But thank you for that question. It was a really, really good one. And I think seems to be less common than in the past, but does still crop up that, parents are concerned or they want to know a bit more. So thank you for responding to that. So Deb, I'm cognizant of the fact that we're getting close to the end of our time, but I did have a couple more little questions for you. And if anyone has others, feel free to drop them in the chat box. So we are, I'm wondering, do you have any particular children who you have spent time with over the last, years who come to your mind when you remember, children who in particular have benefited from practicing mindfulness? Like, what are some maybe who stand out in your memories?
Yeah, last year we had a little boy in year 3. Actually, might have been the year before, because the last year was a COVID year. And he was year 3, and we just couldn't get him to school. Attendance was a major problem. Mum was having her own mental health issues, which was preventing him from coming to school. There was an interesting relationship going on between him and her, where her needs were being met by him staying home. And the more time he had off school, the more challenging it was to get him to school. One of our amazing teachers here, Kerry, who's just such a big advocate for Pause, Breathe, Smile for herself and for her children in her classroom, just worked. Whenever he was here, he would barely be able to get through the front door. He had so much anxiety, and real serious anxiety. It was beyond anyone being just a little bit nervous. He was very challenging to get in through the front door. And Kerry would just sit with him for at least 15, 20 minutes every morning before school, and they'd do some mindful breathing together. And, he would have anxiety attacks during the morning. And Kerry she was an amazing teacher, just would take her time to call him over, and they would sit down, and she'd get her mind jar out, and he'd focus on that to settle him down. I mean, it was ongoing. Eventually, by the end of the year, he was attending school full time and was just such a happier boy. I mean, we honestly put that transitioning to school down to Pause, Breathe, Smile. Kerry having the strategies as a teacher to use, having those in her toolbox to use with him, and him benefiting from that. And then it was just amazing. This year, I mean, he's a different boy. He's happy. He's settled. He's at school all the time now, and he's in year 5. And when they were doing Pause, Breathe, Smile at the beginning of this year, one of our teachers was starting lesson 1 and 2, and he said, oh my goodness, these kids are really serious about this. Because remember, these kids had it all through their schooling. And the little boy that was so anxious a couple of years ago was literally sitting like a little monk, like Zen-like, cross-legged. They're allowed to sit wherever they like when we do PBS in class, like on the floor, on a chair, obviously not on the table, but on a bean bag. And he was there. I walked in on the chair, and he was completely zoned out, like cross-legged. He had his little hands up like this. And the teacher, Chris, who's one of our teachers, he said to me, I've never seen a class like this. He said, look at this one. And I saw him, and I knew the story. Chris didn't know that story so well. And I went and shared that with Kerry, and I said, Kerry, your class are standouts. Like, you actually know the classes those kids have come through where the teacher is super passionate about it. So they just hook and they go into that, what you were doing with us at the top of the core, Janelle, the anchor, anchoring. They just fall into that really quickly. They know the routine, they know what to do. And I think that's what you find when you're in your fourth year. The kids that have been through that for 4 years now, they know that. They're so used to that. But it was just an incredible moment for me seeing him there, so serious and so into it.
That's such
that boy is going to take that into intermediate. And I always say that to the kids, let's imagine, so we teach it every year, even if, let's say 30% of the kids, of the children actually use it. Let's say it's that, I'm sure it's much higher than that, but let's just say that. Imagine that we've given that many children that tool to use. They will take that into intermediate and then into secondary school and perhaps into adulthood. So it's long lasting for many, many children. It's not just here at Manuka School. It goes on and on.
Yeah. So that the legacy of it, that it really does continue.
Yeah,
so that's a great story. We did just get another question from another attendee who said, do you repeat the same lessons every year so the children have done them, the previous term one? So it sounds like, yes, that's what you do.
It is such a good question.
Yeah. Tell us about that.
The reason that's a good question is Grant and I had that discussion Grant and I shared a call at a conference at the beginning of this year, and that is an issue. And I said to Grant, we never teach things over and over in education. We haven't got time to do that, and it's just the number one rule in teaching. You don't teach a child what they already know. It's a waste of time. With Pause, Breathe, Smile, and I had this discussion with Grant, we have got children, and this is really the first year we've had this come up at the beginning of this year. The year 5 and 6 students said, we know this, we know the lesson so well. So we're working with Grant, actually, he's doing another little TOD for us at the beginning of next year, just for an hour, to give us a quick refresh in ways that we can jazz it up a little bit. This year, though, our year 5 and 6 teachers got together, looked at the lessons and looked at ways that they could just play with it a little bit. I know that goes against what I said where we don't want the program watered down, but it was the first time we'd really had that challenge where we thought, gosh, these children are getting the same lesson 4 years in a row. So I haven't really got an answer to that other than it's just something we're dealing with now, and it's the first year the children have brought it up, and they got creative with it. They kept to the handbook, but integrated it, I think, from memory through inquiry, become a part of their inquiry. So, yeah, I will let you know when I know how that goes. And the journals have just been updated, right? And Grant had sent me a whole lot of new journals.
Student learning journals.
Which is really good.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. I know this isn't one of your questions, Janelle, but one of the things, and I would highly recommend this if anyone on the call is a leader who doesn't have their own classroom, get in and do the 8 lessons yourself. I did by accident. We had I can't remember the situation in 2020. I was trying to think of it earlier. So for some reason, I needed to go into a year 4 class, and I taught PBS for 8 weeks. And it was the best thing I ever did. I wouldn't have done that off the bat, but because I had to do it, I think I was releasing her for something. I think it was a long-term reliever. And we needed to give her CRT at the time. And I thought, actually, I'm going to get in there and do Pause, Breathe, Smile. And I learned so much from doing that. I learned, gosh, I've got to have the mind jar made up before I get in there. Whoops. Mindful eating. Whoops, what am I going to give them? Sort of racing around getting those things. And the other thing I learned was that the senior school weren't using the journals. I was horrified. And we were 2 years into it, and no one had bothered using the journals. And I said, right, that's it. Get those journals out, print them out. Everyone's using journals. So when you go in and do it yourself, if you are a leader, try and get in there and do it, because it's not until you pick that handbook up and you have to work your way through it yourself that you realize what the teachers might need. One of the issues that came up for us was the food, the mindful eating. Were they going to pay for themselves? What sort of food could they give the kids? All those really important practical issues in a school. And in the end, what we did is we just, on that particular lesson, we bought apples, because there's mindful eating in many lessons. We just buy fresh apples on that day because no child is allergic to an apple. Well, we haven't met one yet. And it's healthy, and you can cut an apple up into lots of little pieces.
Right.
So, it was just those tiny things, and providing the teachers with a jar and glitter, because all those things take time. Teachers are busy people.
Yeah.
So we tried to help out as much as we could with the resources, because the moment, you look at a lesson and you think, oh, I've forgotten a jar today and I've got no glitter, then it falls away.
Yeah.
So it's about propping them up and supporting them and looking ahead at the lesson, saying, what can we help you with? What do you need? Here's the money.
Well, Deb, unfortunately, we're up on time, but I just want to say thank you again from all of the participants and from all of us at Pause Breathe Smile for being such a wonderful advocate for the program, and for just really embodying a lot of the principles that we are hoping to promote through this program. And I do just want to put a quick plug into anyone who had questions that we didn't quite get to, or if you had some you didn't get to share. Thursday, the 24th of November, we're doing a Whakawhiti Kōrero coaching call called Help, I'm Feeling Stuck. And if you're running into some challenges with Pause, Breathe, Smile, or maybe you're struggling to get lift off at your school, this is the session for you. If you have sticky challenges or you feel like you could use some encouragement, bring your questions for a wonderful panel. I'll be facilitating, and it will include an experienced Pause, Breathe, Smile teacher, an RTLB, and our very own creator of Pause, Breathe, Smile, Grant Ricks. So it'll give you a chance to get feedback on real world questions you and other educators have about how to make mindfulness work with your tamariki. So thank you all so much for joining us. Deb, thank you again for your time and your wisdom and your expertise. You've been a wonderful guest, and thank to you all. We look forward to seeing you hopefully next month, the 24th of November. Until then, take care. Bye, Deb.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.